So great morning, everybody. Today is called Emotional Rescue. In my personal opinion and professional experience, I've seen a lot of stuff happen with emotions. It's if you can't address it, or if you're not addressing emotions and the relationship and how you respond to emotions, you're missing out on some magic.
Great morning, world! Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon!
Great morning, world. Excited to be with you on this special edition of Rise Up with Dragon. Why is it special? I don't know. I just decided it was right now. So great morning, everybody. Just feeling a lot of gratitude this morning. Always feeling it, but today I guess I'm dedicating it to just the recognition of something that I started to do a long time ago, and I followed through. So and I want to offer that to anyone else out there that can resonate with that. I started this concept of rising up before I even knew myself as Dragon, probably about 11 years ago. And I just realized today, well, I've done it every now and then, I realize it, but I just realized today I've been doing it for 11 years. And what's interesting about that is how many rise ups I've done. It's in the thousands now. It's pretty cool. So great morning, world. Great morning to all of you. I want to give a shout out, and I never do any sponsors or anything like that on this show, because for those of you that follow Rise Up with Dragon, you know that it kind of just started off as a practice ground for me to try my crafts and all that stuff. And it turned into a podcast, and I stream it live and everything. And, like I said, we're growing. I mean, we're almost 50,000 downloads this month. But I like to give shout outs. So you could call it a sponsor, and I see one of them has joined us on our clubhouse room, and that's Tia. I want to give a shout out to what I call the Obsessed Girls, and I want everybody to know about them. They have an amazing podcast that I had the honor of being interviewed on one time, and it's called Obsessed with Humans on the Verge of Change. You'll see it, it's got this really great image on it. And there's 4 of these ladies, and they're just amazing. And I want to give them a shout out because for one thing, their podcast is awesome. And I had such a good time being interviewed on it. And I also just so much respect people that, and it's kind of how I opened up this morning. So much respect anybody that follows through and shows up. And that's what these girls do. So I just encourage everybody to go find them on Instagram, find them on, go listen to their podcast, give them a rating and a review. They're going to be massive. And they've got some great stuff going on there. So there's my shout out for the day. And I see Tia is one of those obsessed girls. I mean, who wouldn't want to be friends with the obsessed girls? And we also are starting to talk about the idea of me doing a group training. I don't know if we'll make it a thing or it'll just be for them, but I'm going to teach them the journaling process that I came out with. And that's something that will come out with my book. So great morning, everybody. Today is called Emotional Rescue. And Emotional Rescue was we do a clubhouse room. You can follow me on Clubhouse at Makes Sense. We do a clubhouse room on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, and you definitely want to check that out. That's with Dr. Nima Rahmani, and then also the Obsessed Girls. And we did one, and it was themed. It was themed Emotional Rescue. So we did a little bit of what I'm going to do today, but I did a whole rise up on it. And I'm just super excited to share it with you. And as always, you can find my podcast, Rise Up with Dragon, on all the channels. You can also find me on Instagram at Rise Up with Dragon. And what we do is right after I do this at about the half hour, we'll open up for a little after party in Clubhouse. So if you want to jump into the Clubhouse room, you can hear the uncut, potentially mistakes and fuck ups and everything. Version of the show, and we are also running this on YouTube and all the socials right now. So before I get into emotional rescue, this is something that came to me this morning, and I thought this was super cool. I'm always trying to redefine what health means: physical, mental, and financial health. And I've always looked at health. I'm doing all this work with the interface response system, and it's all about just positioning people with a more efficient system of handling adversity, a more efficient system of the things that we actually control, our response system, right? So I call it the interface response system. So health is very fascinating to me. And I have a pretty crazy health journey story. With my wife and I own a international health coaching company. We have just thousands and thousands of clients international, and we've also trained and certified thousands of coaches. So we're obviously pretty hot on it. So I wrote this down, and just want to throw this into your brain. I wrote down: health is neither good or bad. Now there's a challenge in that for all of you. But here's what I mean. Health is neither good or bad. It's just simply a preference and an opportunity. I think that's a really, really cool way of looking at health. And that's kind of where my mind was at this morning. Health is just a thing, just like we're going to get into emotions now and feelings. Health's a thing, right? You'll never have enough of it. You have a weird relationship with it. You can be healthy or unhealthy. So you never want to judge and give too much value towards one end of it, right? Because if you think you're too healthy, that's a fantasy and you might screw up. And if you think you're unhealthy, then you're putting yourself below the line and you're drifting. And then you'll have to go through all this personal growth work to shift. So anyway, health is neither good nor bad. It's just simply a preference and an opportunity. So that's what it is for me. Every morning I wake up, I have the opportunity, and it's my preference to say great morning and do my rise up. And, at 5:30 this morning, I did my Peloton ride, which was awesome. I want to get one of those Peloton teachers on my show one day. Oh, by the way, I'm excited. I'm full bore going after this author, Melanie Greenberg, who wrote this book, The Stress Proof Brain. I'll show you a visual on it in the social medias. But here's the book. This is one of the best books I've read in years, and it's just so interface response system. So anyway, I'm trying to get her on the show. So let's just jump into this. Let's get into emotional rescue, and I'll kind of tell you where the idea came from. So remember, my journaling process that I said I was going to teach and share with the Obsessed Girls and their crew is what I do every morning. It's an exercise, but it also ends up fruiting some really, really cool ideas. The more you journal, the more you start to, like an antenna, receive these cool things that come from the universe. And I always write them down. That's how I unpack them. And then when I explain them to you, that's when I start to take ownership. So this is called emotional rescue. So in my personal opinion, right, and professional experience, I've seen a lot of stuff happen with emotions. It's if you can't address it, or if you're not addressing emotions and the relationship and how you respond to emotions, you're missing out on some magic. So both mine, when I talk about my experience, both mine and my clients' biggest wins have come on the other side of mastering the skill of separating our emotions and feelings from our judgment of them. So just marinate on that for a second. So what I'm saying is that, I'm always interviewing people at the top of the mountain that say, oh, I do the hard work. I never quit. The reason why that's unbelievable is because many, many people, when they look at that and they look at the idea of how they never follow through, unconsciously, what they don't know, that it has everything to do with emotional mismanagement. It has everything to do with how they're responding to stuff. So those people sometimes forget to tell you that, that's why I wear that shirt. It says breaking news, I don't care. It means I care. Of course I care, but I don't care about anything that doesn't matter. So those people have mastered that skill. So the clients that get the biggest wins that I work with, my clients start off wherever they're at. right? And we usually start with a physical change, and then that's where we unveil the mental. But the ones that get the biggest wins, um, it comes from mastering the skill of separating their emotions and feelings from the judgment that they give them. So I talk a lot about that. So I recently came across some interesting information that inspired this rise up. So in discussing the functional side of emotions, this is from that book I'm reading right now, The Stress Proof Brain. So in discussing the functional side, so there's a functional side of emotions. Very often, I mean, you could look at it and say, yeah, love is functional, right? Love is dangerous too, isn't it? Right. But for the most part, when somebody says, I'm emotional, right? They don't look at it as a positive functional thing. But there's a lot of, functional sides of that. But Melanie Greenberg reminds us that our brains were actually wired to experience emotions. So just grab that for a second. What we're acknowledging right now, and you can read the book Sapiens as well and just like learn where we came from. But our brains were actually wired to experience emotions. So they can't be bad. It's like our brains are just doing their job when they experience emotions. So what I love about that concept is that it validates the idea that experiencing emotions is not a bad thing. So we can unpack and rewire that right away. The next time you say I'm emotional, your friend that listens to the Rise Up with Dragon show should say, well, of course you are. Right? Good job. Good job being a human. So it's actually what we were wired to do, and it's unavoidable. So, I love to talk about unavoidable things that are out of our control. So we have to be very, very careful how much we attach trying to control unavoidable and uncontrollable things. So emotions are unavoidable. So what I really want to do is I just want to talk a little bit about this idea of just accepting them. Like I love what Eckhart Tolle says. He says, first accept, then react. So, I just love this topic. So if we can learn to accept, like Eckhart Tolle says, them as experiences, rather than identify them with, or identify them as a bad reality, we begin to decode and control this game called life. That's what I believe we're all working on, especially those of you that are doing self-help and personal growth. I think what you're really trying to do, and I like to redefine this, as I think you're trying to get your hands back on the controls, the joystick, and control the game, right? You can't control everything in life, but the game is the experience of life. And the experience of life is your perception, is a big, that's the interface response system. The interface part of that is you interfacing with life. And that's everything. The things that happen, happenings, and emotions are kind of like on the front line of that interface and that experience. So what we're trying to do by improving our physical, mental, and financial well-being is we're trying to empower and equip ourselves to better control that experience. Because if you can control that experience and that game, well, you're going to stay on track. And all you got to do to succeed in life is stay on track. So think this through with me. Is it the events that happen to you and your emotions that send you into a tailspin? Is it the actual things that happen and your emotions that send you into a tailspin? Or is it the judgment and the value that you place on them? See, that's the fun, that's the magic, that's the sweet spot right now. Is we can all kind of identify that emotions are there and there's these things that trigger them, but that's part of the unavoidable thing because we're wired to do it. So that's not the problem. The challenge that we have, and it's not our fault because we were programmed by our mother, father, teacher, preacher, and all of this stuff, Dr. Nima talks about that stuff. We were programmed to react a certain way. And it's unconscious, and I've talked about the way the brain works with the amygdala and the hippocampus and all that stuff. So if we can learn how to change the mechanism and the response system upon which we post judgment and value on things, well, then we start to win. So, and then I say yes, and it's the latter. That's the one that affects it. It's our judgment. And the good news is that we can control it. So if you want to become a control freak, which is not a bad thing, I always play the game, good word, bad word. Being a control freak is not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it's what everybody's trying to do, right? So come be a control freak with me today, and let's talk a little bit and learn how to potentially slow the process down and refrain from posting judgment and value on things. Because if you can learn how to do that, you're going to fly. You're going to fly. So the judgments of the happenings. So not the actual happenings. So let's rewire our brains for a second on the word judgment. Now, we spoke about this on our clubhouse that we didn't record the other day. So the word judgment, we have to get certain with this. Is that a good word or a bad word? Most likely in your mind, right? We say, oh, we don't judge. This is a judgment-free zone. So most likely in your mind, judgment would be a bad word, right? In your mind. So we're going to rewire that. So let's try another one. How about perception? Perception is not a bad word, right? When we say, when we talk about perception, it's most likely kind of neither a good word or a bad word. It's just a thing, right? So more commonly good though, perception. So see, everything that we do with our perception creation machine, right? So think about what I mean when I say that. We have this machine, this perception creation machine, which I like to refer in my teachings and my book as our VR suit. When I talk about a virtual reality suit, and I'll give another shout out to my great friend Abigail Voles, who talks about she digs this idea of putting, we're in this place right now, and Elon Musk talks about this, where we're very, very close to this place where you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a virtual experience with goggles on and a real experience. So this is something to look at. But the virtual reality suit is basically referring to all of our six senses, but they've been programmed to react to things. That's at emotional mismanagement. So everything that we do with our perception creation machine or our VR suit is about perceiving and sending. So in fact, the whole IRS, the interface response system, and development of a more efficient response system requires an upgraded level of perception and version of perception. So here's what I mean by that. If we want to manage our emotions, well, first of all, we said we have to accept them because they're unavoidable and we're wired to do it. But we also have to figure out how to create a different perception of things like emotions, right? So we need to upgrade our perception. And that means that we have to upgrade our virtual reality suit, because our virtual reality suit is running on autopilot. So we have to upgrade it. So sometimes we have to first of all, recognize that we're wearing a virtual reality suit. And that virtual reality suit, you think that you're in control of the way you look at things, but you automatically, when you look at something or you react to something and it triggers an emotion, that's that automatic programming that you have. So we have to learn how to reprogram. And it takes time. So what's the difference between perception and judgment? Not much. Think about it. They're kind of like first cousins, perception and judgment. So it's okay to judge because it's actually what we're here to do. And Dr. Nima said that on our Truth Bombs clubhouse the other day. Think about it. We're value-seeking missiles. We don't think, say, or do anything that doesn't have any value. So therefore, when we're going through life, Donald Hoffman, author of Case Against Reality, talks about the fact that we're always looking to increase our fitness points in and moving forward and evolving with natural selection. We're all trying to move forward in life. So we have to make good judgment calls, right? So judgment's not a bad word. It's actually what we're here to do. The negative connotation attached to judgment is when we do it without seeing all sides and checking facts. That's what I've discovered, is that when we judge things without really knowing what those things are. And this is where we start to get into emotional rescue. So it's still okay at the time that you do it. Here's an interesting thing. Even when we unconsciously pose a negative judgment, which, by the way, the only person that knows that you're posing negative judgment is a bystander that's watching. You don't know you're doing it because it's unconscious, right? But even when we pose a negative judgment on something, at the time that we did it, we thought it was a good idea. This is powerful. or at least our response system thought so, but it doesn't prove to help advance things for you or the thing or person that's misunderstandingly gets the unfair judgment. Here's a fun thought. Think about this. This is one of the things that changed my life forever. So I had a mentor one time ask me this when I was at a very unstable, unhealthy time in my life. And just as a quick shout out, I want to say hi to the folks gathering on Clubhouse. We'll be done at the half hour, and we'll have an after party. Where this is called Emotional Rescue, and it's good to see everybody there. I love to hear what you guys have to say. So here's a fun thought. I had a mentor one time ask me this. He says, "JC, what's more important to you?" And I'm asking you this right now. What's more important to you, to be right or kind? Now, that was so profound, and that changed my life forever because it unveiled that my current challenge at that time, when I was not moving forward in life, was that I unconsciously, meaning it wasn't my fault, I unconsciously always needed to be right. So as what that means is, as I was judging things and evaluating things, I was always trying to prove that I was right about them. I always wanted to be right about things that I perceived, including my emotions. That's why sometimes if I got sad, I would use some sort of an affirmation to say, I'm not sad. Like I very often I would try to control my emotions by pretending that they didn't exist rather than accepting them. So that was at an early phase. That was pre-dragon. I was probably like maybe just like a kimono dragon or something at that point. So then he said, after that question, he says, think about this. This is profound. He says, think about this. What did anyone ever get for being right? And he said, when he first said that, I was like, well, I kind of gravitated towards things that I thought I was right about, and they were helpful. But here's what he meant. He says, everyone is right. When somebody states a fact, and whether it's a true or false fact, when somebody states a fact and puts an exclamation point at the end, this is this, right? Even if they subconsciously kind of know it's bullshit, when somebody states a fact and says that it is, even if they're wrong, they think they're right. So everybody's right, right? So in the interface response system, and when somebody says something, a big win for you and your advancement is when you hear someone say something and you know that they're wrong, which is another version of you putting an exclamation point. Do you know that when you claim somebody's wrong in your mind, you're trying to be right? Wouldn't it be cool if you didn't choose either side? Now it's tough when somebody says, you see that thing up there during the day? That's the moon. And you're like, well, it's the sun, and you shouldn't look at it right now. But still, I think it's a really, really cool place to live where you don't claim to be right about anything. And that's why I teach everybody to say, before you respond. And that gives you a little bit of that cognitive distancing and time to just think about it and gain the more rational side of your brain. So even if they're wrong, they think they're right. So to post your judgment and give value to an event and emotion is the same thing, right? So that's what I mean when you post judgment on an emotion and you put an exclamation point, your brain is going to buy in. Your prefrontal cortex will buy in and claim that it's right. So if you think that you're upset and it's somebody's fault, you're going to get a full buy-in, and that's gonna take over your day. So even if it's off, so it's on because you say so. When you say something is, it becomes so. It is. So then it becomes a thing that you build your day around, right? The things that you think are right. See, I did a great podcast called the Gateless Gate, and I love the Buddhist philosophy of living a life that's neither here nor there. It's a real comfortable place, but it's tough. The reason why we struggle so much with just letting go of being right is because being right is part of our wiring and our programming to survive. We have to make good judgments in dangerous times, but there's not a lot of dangerous times right now. You know what I mean? when you're reacting to a stack of bills and all you got to do is pay them and you're stressed out about it and you fully buy into that and you lose a day because you think that you're stressed out about money, that's where it gets sticky. So back to emotions. Let's agree that it's impossible to experience an emotion without perceiving and placing judgment upon it, right? It's not a bad word. It's the method by which you perceive and judge without the facts or the persuasion of your programmed mind. That's the challenge. That's the sticky part. So that's where things get sticky. And when your program is calling the shots in life, and what I mean by that is, whatever you've been taught to think by your mother, father, teacher, preacher, your programs, and also all this stuff you're consuming with the Facebook reel and TV and all that stuff. When your program mind is calling the shots, that's when you start to make, that's where you start to fumble. So emotions, they're unavoidable and fine. First accept, then react. So the method by which we respond is where we have to work. So the method by which we respond, which is where we need to work, is what's cool about that is that's the part of this sequence that's actually in your control and it's worthwhile working on. So your key to success at managing your emotions lies in your understanding of how they work and making sense of their potential value. So I talked a little bit about Melanie Greenberg's bringing up the functional value of emotions. You're going to love this. So let's quickly unpack these valuable assets that you sometimes perceive are bad. So look at fear. Fear is something that actually alerts you to a threat and gives you a chance of getting away. So it's actually programmed in there for survival. What about anger, right? Anger is a bad thing, right? So anger, or as I call anti-joy, because it's a decision. Anger helps you protect yourself and it rears you up to defend yourself in the face of danger. Well, how about shame and regret? How could we ever think shame and regret were a good thing? Shame and regret aid you in helping you make different choices, right? Now, the way we're using it today might not be helpful, but they're there for a reason. So when you experience them, that's how you can learn how to accept these things. They're there for a reason. What about sadness? Sadness helps you conserve energy so that you can grieve, so that you can. Sadness is like a feeling that we feel that slows things down. It slows things down so we can conserve energy for something else. So when you're stressed, when you're experiencing the stress response, you're actually experiencing all of these. So the key is to observe them happening. So what I mean by observe them is if you slow things down and you say, and you, even when you're feeling something, it gives you the opportunity to observe things happening and accept the process that we were wired to experience and now understand why we're doing it. It helps you not look at emotions as such a bad thing. You just say, yeah, it makes sense why I'm feeling that way. It's what we do. But it doesn't mean that we have to buy into them. So then, using the interface response system concept, which is what I teach people from start to finish, using that mind, that different type of a mind of observation, identify if the emotions are needed. So I just gave you some functional concepts about emotions. The idea is to identify if they're warranted and they're needed and useful, right? Or perhaps, because this is what I was saying about the VR suit, or perhaps your VR suit needs to be tweaked and desensitized. Here's the thing. I think that your VR suit is sensitized. It's been overly sensitized. Why does it get sensitized? So this goes back to two things. What it is that we're consuming on a regular basis and our inability to filter the incoming stimulants as unwarrantable happenings of potential valuable responses. So we're consuming stuff over and over and over again unconsciously and not understanding that stupid stuff, like watching the news and all of this stuff that we're consuming on the highlight reel of social media. What you don't know is you're programming your VR suit and you're sensitizing it. You're making yourself sensitive, overly sensitive to stuff that doesn't matter. And that's what's hard about controlling your emotions, is if you have a very, very sensitized VR suit, And I think a lot of you have that. That's why we say, oh, she's so sensitive. She's not sensitive. Her VR suit is. There's a version of that person inside that's not sensitized. So my system is about desensitizing the VR suit. See, I believe our challenge is this idea of having this overly sensitive VR suit. So we've spoken about stress response systems and how it begins with a fired up amygdala. We've talked about that. Sending off that warning shot. That's that first version of it. Like, oh no, that's the sensitive side of the VR suit, is that initial perception, right? So that's how you can kind of like become aware of it. Sends off a warning shot. So that happens. What happens when somebody reads the social media feed or watches the news all day? Think about it. That's where it's coming from. Or hangs around the wrong, unconscious, unsupportive, and negative people in their lives. These are all things within your control. We get unconsciously sensitized and defensive. This is why we start labeling our emotions and identifying that our reality is unfair or unfavorable. And we call that going below the line. And that's where we step away from responsibility and things like that. So the goal of the IRS in large part is to desensitize our VR suit, which I keep saying. So part of my journaling process is I write, I just write as I hear it. So I'm sharing that with you here. Meaning getting better at recognizing stupid shit that has nothing to do with anything. And then here's another thing as we come to the end. And I think I put this on my Instagram the other day. The question is, what comes first, your thoughts or your emotions? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share with you, we forgive you for you know not what you do. This is why we struggle with this. So think before you answer. What comes first in this whole sequence, your thoughts or your emotions? So brain researchers have discovered that there are many more neural connections leading from emotional to thinking areas of the brain than the other way around. What that means is that you have much, much more wiring and connections leading from the emotional to the thinking areas of the brain. So this means that your emotions are primary and your thoughts are secondary. Here's a cool thing to think about. Do you know that your thoughts are your way of analyzing your emotions? So what this is saying is that science says that emotions come first. So that's why this is so important. You think that you can think your way into emotions, but what science is telling us is it happens the other way. So remember that your emotions are wired into your brain via evolution and your programming. So they're not easily rewired. So pause here and see that whatever you consume on a regular basis, as I was saying, represents the code for your program. So careful watching the news. I know that you have your own reasons of doing it, or hanging around with naysayers. You know, when I hang out, and I gave a shout out to the obsessed girls before. I like to hang out with people like that. You know, it's my choice. It's the fantasy that I choose to live, is to hang around with those kind of people rather than naysayers. Spending a little too much time on the social media feed. Be careful of that. Our ability to accept our feelings as just feelings. We talked about that. Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Then move into observing and describing them rather than reacting to them. That's where the win lies. That's the space. You see, when you observe rather than react, it creates space and time for you to access that more rational part of the brain. So my system of coaching clients is all about empowering them physically, mentally, financially, with the goal of creating a better response system to the uncontrollable things that bump into us in life. So what you think about that? So ready to reclaim control? Get your hands back on the joystick of this game on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. And this was my post. To what degree are you ready to take control of your life today? And what I'll close by saying is if you're anywhere above an 8, you're going to have a great day. If you're below an 8, if you're a 7 in your readiness, it means that you maybe understood some of the things that we just spoke about, but you don't believe them. And the challenge with that is that you think that you need to believe in things in order for them to work. Now, remember what I said about the virtual goggles. Things don't actually even need to be real for them to seem real to you. So all you have to do is just make a decision on what it is that you want, why it's important, and just go after it. Go after it and reprogram your VR suit. And remember that everybody thinks they're right, and they are, right? Everybody's right. So love and appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed this. This is a very, very fun topic for me. Thanks so much for all the support. Rise Up with Dragon podcast on all the social medias and stuff. You can find me at Instagram, Rise Up with Dragon. We're going to open up the Clubhouse room right now. Makes sense is how you can find me. And I love and appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.